Hi everybody and welcome to my Best of Superbooth 2024. If you're new to Superbooth, it's basically a music mess in Berlin. Originally it was for small and emerging brands to showcase their latest and greatest instruments and synths, but it's grown into its own dedicated trade show. And I was there last year and you can definitely see that it's growing in terms of brands and products. And I just got back from the trade show to Sweden like 2 days ago, and you're always filled with impression and inspiration after these kinds of trade shows. And in this video we're going to look at some clips from the trade show, and I'm going to talk about some of my favorite things from Superbooth 2024. First, a big thank you to all the subscribers that came up to me at the trade show. It's always a pleasure to hear about your musical journeys and what inspires you from these kinds of trade shows. So to all of you, a big thank you, and for those of you that didn't make it to the trade show, sorry, and maybe we can catch up next year. Right, so on my first day of Superbooth I discovered this synth from Melbourne Instruments called Delia. And it really made an impression on me, and I got the chance to play a little bit with the synth, as you can see here in the clips. Now, unfortunately, I didn't shoot a long dedicated video on the Delia synth on Superbooth, but hopefully we can get this synth to the studio so we can shoot a full review on the synth here in Sweden. But a quick short description of the synth. It's a bitimbre polysynth inspired by the motorized control panel and voice architecture of the original Melbourne Instruments Nina synth. Delia introduces 49-key velocity and aftertouch sensitivity keyboard, new multimode analog filters, high-pass, low-pass, resonance control, and a 3-stage overdrive, and even more modulation possibilities. Okay, so how about the sound? To me it sounds a little bit like the high-end crispiness of the PPG Wave. At least that's the synth that came to my mind when I played the Delia synth. And it's really fun to see all the knobs move when you change the presets to reflect the actual parameter values. Which, like I said, isn't something that you see every day on a synth. But that's probably gonna be reflected in the price point too, since you need a little motor for every knob. And it has a low pass and a high pass filter. The high pass is a ladder filter. And they can be linked for bandpass and notch operation, which is really cool. And yeah, some of the sounds that I played sounded really, really nice, and I would love to have this in the studio and try it out and compare it with some of my other synths. Okay, so quick break to talk about today's video sponsor, DistroKid. DistroKid makes it easy and convenient to get your music up to all the relevant streaming platforms like Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, plus many more. Personally, I've been using DistroKid for all my streaming releases for the past decade. You pay once a year and then you can upload an unlimited amount of tracks. One of the many great features of DistroKid is the Hyperfollow function. Hyperfollow makes it super easy to share all your new releases with all your fans with one single URL. I already did a complete video on Hyperfollow, so if you want to learn more about that, click the card up here. Okay, so if you have music you want to release on streaming platforms, use my DistroKid affiliate link in the description. Not only do you support my channel, but you also get a discount on the DistroKid subscription. Thanks. Right, so my next stop at the convention was obviously to check out the Sequential and the Oberheim booth. And it was really fun to see that they hooked up like a bunch of different bass station synths to a single keyboard, and then they had this really big knob to control the filter. And I can really tell you that the whole room was shaking when they played that multi-bass station. Right, so last year I tried out the Trigon 6 synth, and albeit it's expensive, it sounds of course really, really good. And I also made a sample pack while at Superbooth last year, so if you want to check out that Trigon OP sample pack, you can check the links in the description to this video. But this year I was going to check out the TO5, which finally makes one of the Oberheim synths with the SEM filter affordable. It's like 1.7k euros. Yeah, so my impression of the TE-05. It has a really great sound. You definitely hear that classic SAM filter when you drive the cutoff. And it also features an X mod, which is really great to have available on the interface. And the great thing about the filter on the TE-05 is that it's a state variable filter. That means that you can go from low pass to high pass. And yeah, I really like the sound of this one, especially if you bump the drive. But the only downside that I found on the TE-05 is basically the build quality of the knobs, because I feel that they felt a little bit like plastic and cheap for this kind of expensive instrument, especially if you compare it to the knobs on the Summit, because it's like in the same price range, but these feel a lot better than the TE-05. Right, so that's my impression of the TE-05. And as always, please let me know in the comments what you think about the new TE-05 and if you played it at Superbooth. Right, so the next day, on Friday at Superbooth, I checked out the new King Korg Neo from Korg, obviously. And it's a new rendition of the original King Korg, except that they dropped out the vacuum tube. And it's a virtual analog synth, or a virtual modulating synth. And it features a 16-band vocoder, which is kind of cool. Now, sadly, I didn't check out the vocoding part on Superbooth, but if you want to check out my sound demo of the King Korg, you can click the card up here and it'll take you to the video I shot with some different presets that I played on the King Korg. Right, so a little bit about the specs. It's a 16-band vocoder on the King Korg, and it has a lot of different effects, obviously. And I think that the sound was as creamy as the interface. Yeah, so some of you complained about the color scheme of the King Korg Neo, that it's like a creamy white on the chassis, and then you have these pure white knobs and pure white keys. But to me, the new Super 8 and also the new Arturia Polybrute 12 looks a lot cleaner and has a better interface design compared to the King Korg Neo. Yeah, so again, the Korg King Neo has a vocoder, 16-band vocoder, and I think it's 24 voice polyphony on the synth, virtual analog, and yeah, that's about it. So you can go and check my video if you want to listen to sound samples of the King Korg Neo. Right, so next up we have the Polybrute 12, and this synth really made an impression on me. I wasn't too keen on the previous Arturia Polybrute because I didn't really like the color scheme, and it looks like a little bit too bulky kind of synth to work with. But after just calling up a few presets here on the Polybrute 12 and playing a little bit with the Touché, is it called Touché? That controller you have on the side, and I instantly made a track on spot there at Superbooth. And if you want to check that video and listen to my little performance called The Depth of Mankind, you can click the card up here, or yeah, check out the video links in the description. But all in all, I really like the sound of the Polybrute 12. But then again, I came back to the hotel and I checked out the price, and it's probably not going to be something that I buy to the studio here, because it's 4.5k euros, 46,890 Swedish crowns. And the new thing about the Polybrute 12, aside from having more voices, it's also featuring a new technology, a new key technology called Full Touch, which means that you can use the full range of the key press to control different parameters. And it's a really expressive keyboard. Right, so that's it for the Polybrute 12. Now for my final favorite thing from Superbooth 2024, it's obviously gonna be the Super 8. And this is definitely like a spaceship synth. And yeah, some people have complained about the design choices of this synth. It's definitely looking like R2-D2, and you also have this kind of radiator thing happening on the new synths, which you also saw on the Polybrute. At the top of the synth, you have this radiator grill. Yeah, I really like the design choices here on the Super 8 and also on the Polybrute, the Polybrute 12. Yeah, so while I only played the Super 8 briefly at Superbooth 2024, it's just too crowded, too many people in the small bungalows. But the sound is just lovely in the synth, and I'm thinking about trading my Summit to the Super 8. We'll see what happens here in the coming months. Yeah, so all in all, I'm just drawn to the sound of the Super 8. And again, unfortunately, I couldn't shoot a video, but hopefully we can get this to the studio and shoot some nice videos with it. Right, so some other worthy mentions from the trade show is definitely Kilohearts. And I met up with the nice guys from Kilohearts at Superbooth, and we had a great time, and they talked to me about their new plugins in the Shaper and the Shaper Table. Shaper is going to be a part of the free Essentials collection from Kilohearts, and then Shaper Table will be a paid plugin. And it's basically a new way of creating like distortions or custom distortions or custom tables from your audio. Right, so it's gonna be super fun to try out these new Shaper plugins in Faceplant and also in the Snap-Hip plugin. Alright, so at the trade show I also met up with Robert, or you probably know him as Polarity. And we had a really nice time, a nice talk, and hopefully we can do some collaborations here in near future. And we were also invited to the 10th anniversary for Bitwig Studio, and I got this nice t-shirt and some giveaways in a nice little bag. Yeah, and Bitwig were obviously showcasing Bitwig Studio 5.2, which is in beta, and you can check out my video if you click the card up here. Yeah, so I had a really nice time at the Bitwig 10th anniversary party, and it's always nice to get to these more relaxed environments, and it was located at a place called Klunkerkranisch, which is like at the roof of a shopping mall, and you have this great overview of the whole Berlin city. And yeah, it's really beautiful and a nice relaxed environment to meet up with nice people. And at the Klunkerkranisch I managed to hook up with the Orchestral Tools, so it was super fun to finally meet up with some of the team at the Orchestral Tools and talk a little bit about products, the future, AI and whatnot. Right, so that's a little bit about the Bitwig 10th anniversary party. So a big thank you to Bitwig for inviting me to the festivities. Right, so aside from these like high-end keyboards that we talked about here in my Superbooth compilation, there's obviously millions more smaller companies at a convention like this with a lot of like different modular and exotic kind of synth instruments. But if you follow my channel, you probably know that I'm more into like keyboards and synthesizers rather than these kind of modular synths. But some other worthy mentions from the show is definitely Electron Digitakt 2 and the Dirtwave Mate Mark II, because they made a ton of great upgrades to the Mate tracker, like USB-C TRS input-outputs. It's a bigger 3.5-inch display, 4 times the battery size, which will give you up to 12 hours of fiddling with the Mate, and also a built-in microphone. And like last year, I also hooked up with the Chris from Expressive E, and if you follow my channel, you know that I love the Osmo synth. So we talked a little bit about doing some more collaborations here in the near future with their Noise 2 synth, which is a synth that's specifically made for MPE, and it works really good with the Osmo synth. So I can't wait to get my hands on Noise 2, and I'll make a video on that later here down the line. Yeah, so finally at Superbooth I also checked out the new Ear A2 from Embod.me. And if you missed my previous video on the Ear A1 from Embod.me, you can click the card up here, or again check the links at the bottom. And basically the Ear A is this kind of multi-touch surface. I'm a drummer, so it's really fun to play with drums on this one, but the new one has a lot better like surface control and surface sensitivity. And it also has like a built-in sequencer and some other new cool functionalities. Right, so I hope you had a nice time checking out my best of Superbooth 2024. If you have any questions of the gear we talked about today, please let me know in the comments. And if you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to check that notification bell, because if you don't have the bell, you won't see if I release new videos. So click that bell, ring that bell, so you get notifications as soon as I drop new videos. Right, so that's all for today. My name is Matthias. See you in the next video. Bye.